questions or comments about the agenda for tonight?
First unfinished business, the Elderwood, it's gonna remain on its table. The county still hasn't gotten back, no, over this, so that's still be tabled.
Okay. Bev, you have an item you wanna bring up at the beginning of this meeting, correct? You said you wanted to suspend the rules.
Oh, okay, we need to, I'd like to suspend the rules to do a negative declaration. Doug and Bob put it together for the Granite Island Solar request for waiver of subdivision, splitting of lots. Okay, so.
You don't have to, you can do that as part of the agenda, you can do the secret first and then do your waiver of subdivision.
We can do it all
You
at
can
once.
you can do the secret right now if you want, you can do the secret right now, if you wanna do it
But now
now.
the
If not,
negative
you can go up and when
declaration,
it's on the agenda.
We don't have
Better
to-
to do it upstairs.
do
We always
to-
did secrets in the workshops, we all, in like
Yeah, the negative
99.999999.
declaration, usually we do down here, but we have to do the,
You have
that
to
one
do the next
first.
deck first, so just do it at the beginning, so you'll have motion A and motion B. in the
Motion A
minutes.
and B.
Well, I mean, to me, that's how I would put, I'm gonna put it in a seeker and then, cause you have to do, if you have to do a seeker, then seeker has to be done first. So
And
you
then we
wouldn't,
vote on it, yeah.
yep, and then you'd vote on, I think it's a request of waiver of
Do I
subdivision
have to
rights.
get, do I have to suspend the rules to add it? It's all one part and parcel.
That's the agenda.
Okay.
yeah.
So we'll do it that way.
Did Bob give you, are you gonna present the seeker or Nate?
You can do it,
Okay.
I'll
do
give
it.
him the paperwork.
I got it.
Yeah,
So it's just
Bob,
gonna be to issue a negative deck if that's what.
Right,
what's
and
in-
then
And
we'll
then
just
you could do, when I do the
approve
minutes,
these.
you'll see there's two parts underneath that subtitle.
Okay, yeah.
Brittany, could you just explain that to me?
Well, a negative declaration, seeker is that it's not gonna have an environmental impact, basically, and Doug and Bob have gone through the whole thing to make sure everything's in place. And you need to do that first before you can approve the split of the lot.
Okay, so the splitting of the lot doesn't have it's not about the solar, it's the splitting of the lot.
Right, no, it's
Right.
not about the project, only the splitting of the lot.
That's the next step. The next step will be is like,
Yeah,
Which
this
would-
is just for the prod.
Got it.
There's two projects that are still just sitting on the table, that's that Love All subdivision, the seeker hasn't come through yet. Elderwood project, they're still waiting for the sewer extension approval from the county or DC approval, so those are sitting there too, they're not on the agenda, but I just wanted to update you guys to let you know what
Didn't that
happened.
lady say the seeker was done last meeting or not? And I know we didn't
For which
approve
one?
it, for the one, the subdivision.
Seven.
Oh, the 30 days hadn't gone by Bob West.
Okay, that's.
Oh, is that why the 30 days?
Right.
This had something to do
But-
with the 30 days.
Bob-
Are you doing that secret tonight too?
No, Bob called, the engineer that's doing that and said that for the next meeting, we can put it on the agenda.
Okay.
It's fine the way it is, they're just getting it, they haven't got the paperwork, but the 30 days is up.
Okay.
So they should be getting the paperwork, we don't have it, they didn't get it yet, so as soon as they get it, we'll probably get it this
It was
week.
for the public hearing one that Kristen Savard was at. So
Right.
that is off the table, that's not on, that's not back on, yeah, because I
Right.
didn't get word from anybody.
Right,
But it was because of the 30 days something.
yes, and everything's going through, we just don't have the paperwork, so they said,
Right.
there's no big rush, we can do it in 2 weeks, so they didn't even want us to push it through.
Okay, that's fine. I think I talked to him after I got back about that.
Good?
Yeah.
Mike, good?
Was it the draft document retention? No, it was something else where we just wanted it to be revised from the supervisor to the board member. Do you remember what that was, Nate?
No, I do not, I'm sorry. Is that
It's in the email. Let's print the whole thing out.
It was on this
In
topic.
in the document retention thing?
This is it, right here.
What is it? Oh, and the complaint mechanism?
on the agenda. It's on the agenda, it's not on the agenda.
For which item are you talking about that, you know?
I think he's talking about the document retention policy.
Well, is that what Ray was talking about? That's.
Oh, no, he was talking about the fact that for he's saying that I gave approval by the board for a change of a review for Maloney's Shack. That's not what happened. What happened is Doug came in and said to me, it needs to go to architectural review, and I said, okay, are you sure about that? Have you talked to architectural review? And he says, well, if the chairman says it doesn't, I'm fine with it. I said, do you have any care if I reach out to the chairman? Doug said, go ahead. Called the chairman said, we don't care. It's almost the same thing, go ahead. Went to Doug, and Doug said, great. So I replied to Ray, I told him that's what happened.
And what did he say? Did he respond to you?
He did not respond to me yet.
And actually, that's not what I was talking about. It was a
I
law.
know what you're talking about. I've got
Way
it
this
here.
thing lays
It
out.
says, in section 2, supervisor needs to be replaced with board. So I don't know what section that is.
In this law? Let me see.
I think he says,
Yeah, that's in the complaint procedure.
That's the
Yeah,
complaint
complaint
procedure.
procedure.
Yeah, well, that's just
That's
something.
not on the agenda, right?
no.
It is.
Yeah,
It's on the number 4 of the workshop.
That's not on the town board.
Not on the town board
Okay,
agenda.
so we just
Okay.
need to get that fixed if everyone agrees with
We can
this.
fix that. That's just a draft. so.
I've already edited it.
Okay.
Okay.
Just wanted to cover
Chris, anything else on the board agenda for tonight?
Marie's absence, so.
So I'm gonna move on to number 2 then. Extending the flex hours. We've had no complaints about this, full coverage, and the employees love it. I don't see it as a big deal. I want to extend it if we can, unless someone objects. Any objections to that? I wanna make sure we get approval from you guys.
I would do it upstairs, is that, I'd rather just do that vote upstairs rather than down here. Do we have to vote on this?
No, I just wanna make sure there's no objections to it.
Okay,
So,
As long as there's no
then
problems,
if there's
no
not a vote, then
complaints.
it's fine.
there's been no complaints. RFQ for community center, did you guys get this yet? You got 6 responses.
They're all
I
on the
did,
table.
I did look at them quickly. There was only one that I saw a price on though, right? Are we looking for a price quote?
No.
No,
We're
it was
just looking
very
for-
broad. Ideas, and this will allow us to go into negotiations regarding different people who might be able to do it and what they do. It's just the first step. It's not a price quote yet, it's just a expression of interest in discussing this with the town.
So we're trying to scope this out. We're not really spending any money at this point in
No.
time.
It's all grant money,
Yeah.
so you're just submitting ideas right now.
Yeah, there was, I looked through them all. And there was only one that actually put feasibility studies and stuff
Right,
like
I saw
that.
that. I don't know how
But
they came
some-
up with the numbers, but
Yeah,
it was
I went,
creative.
yeah, I went through it. But that was, cause I looked after
So-
that, I looked it up through all the others looking for numbers and there
Right.
wasn't any.
yeah, only
So
one.
can we set a date to review those? Can we do it in 2 weeks? Is that enough time?
So
Yeah,
I
the sooner the
guess,
better.
I guess what are we doing? Trying to narrow it down to a couple?
That we can ask for additional information from,
Okay.
that we like their ideas from.
And actually ask for some kind of a
Quote.
proposal or whatever.
Yes.
And so I didn't get enough for everybody, so, like, if you take them home one night to review them all, just bring them back and, like,
That's
soon.
fair.
Yep.
And then, well, you did a good job, everyone, last time with the website. The website, by the way, is halfway developed. We should have a chance to give it to you,
I should get the site plan in the next day or two.
It seems like it's way behind schedule though, isn't it? I
It's
thought
just-
it was
just
supposed
because
to be
they're
weeks, not months.
well, it is, but it's so much information to populate, that's the issue. And,
And I think the important, an important part, and just confirm, I'm pretty sure it would be the case, like, I found myself even looking back to 95, I want all the information that's currently there to remain there, even though it may be a questionable practice to retain all that, but we need to retain all that, in my
I
opinion.
think-
We had the ability to archive it, but
I think we're archiving as far as we can go, that's what's taking so long, because there's so much information.
But the general public could go in and say, okay, I know something bad happened or something good happened in 1995, we'll go with the good.
Yes.
All of her, all of her minutes and all that stuff will be, that's why they're taking so long to do it.
None of the prices have changed.
Nothing's
have they?
changed, no. You know what might be helpful though? Well, it's not on the agenda, I'll put it on the next workshop.
Yeah, for that, sorry, just real quick.
Go ahead.
not to interrupt. If the price changed, that would come back to us for approval, I would assume.
Yes, it would,
Okay.
of course.
I don't think they can change it.
We're
No,
not
they
gonna
can't.
change it.
We have a
Got
contract.
a contract.
RFQ for the community center, so do you wanna set it 2 weeks from now, is that okay? Does everyone agree with that, as the date to review those and give comments? Cindy,
Sounds reasonable.
will you put that down?
Mhm.
then? Okay, so
I
we,
took him home last night, was yesterday Sunday, yes. Yesterday, I took him home and read through them, so I've looked through them and done the categorizing and stuff already, so you know, if you guys wanna take them.
so the next topic, a little bit
Just real
harder to
quick though,
explain.
back on
Go
that,
ahead.
we have meeting the 12th, the 20th, and the 21st. You wanna get together a few minutes earlier on the 12th to review that? Is that too
Yes.
soon?
I'd be happy to do it then. How about you,
If
Cindy?
you guys can take him home.
I mean, I can.
I already took him home.
Awesome.
but,
The 12th.
You wanna start at
Or,
9:30?
or Thursday the 20th, one of the, either one. I mean, I can read them.
Your budget meeting might take a long time.
I'm really worried that we need all the time we can get for that budget.
Okay, we'll do it, yeah, that's what Jim's shaking his head as he's been through this before, so.
What if we meet
Let's
at
do it in 2
9:30
weeks.
though?
Does it meet at 9:30?
I'm happy with that, but I don't wanna kill us and mean we're
Okay,
all
which
dead.
day is that now we're looking at? The 12th?
Or the 20th,
Let's do the 12th,
rather than
Well,
get another meeting.
I
9 AM. I can do that.
I don't think they're
I
gonna take
can't
that
do
long.
9.
Well, you're meeting on the 11th as well.
Cause I have an 8:30, I
No,
can
it's
make
gonna
it
be
by
a-
10:30,
We're gonna have to
but I
make
can't
a
make it
workshop?
at 9, or,
No,
It's Tuesday.
sorry. What time are we starting
Tuesday.
on the 12th?
10.
We're starting at 10.
So, I have a meeting at 9:30, it's usually done by
Let's just reschedule.
10. No, I did the meeting.
How about at the end
I
of
could
that
meet at
meeting?
9:30, I could do my 9:30 on the 12th.
Well, that's
Check
all
it
I'm
out.
doing.
I mean, I don't think we'll need more than half an hour.
well, everyone should come with their comments all prepared, and they just give us your top 3.
So
Okay.
9:30 on the 12th.
Just bring your top 3 and a sentence for why you like them, so we can quickly analyze that.
So we're aiming to edit
Cindy, go
these.
change that.
Changing the meeting to 9:30?
Yeah,
Okay, so you're gonna meet, cause I've already posted, so I
I
gotta
know.
change the time to 9:30, that's all.
that's fine.
And it's community center at 9:30, okay, 10 and budget.
Okay, is that good, guys?
We gotta let Ray know.
We will.
I'll send an email.
Good with that, everybody? Customer service, citizen complaint policy, so let me talk about that for a second. So, you know, I think the customer service at Town Hall is not that, it's not terrible. I kinda think we should maybe think about it, doing some customer service building exercises. Patty's office does great, by the way, and most of it's pretty good. I think we could do better for customer service, but I think if we created a complaint policy that doesn't create a way to rat people out and get them in trouble, but actually kinda analyze how we're doing as a town hall. So that's just a draft that we circulated. I also took some additional steps. I've been trying to figure out, different ways to improve some of our departments. We talked about last week the fact that we might wanna put the code enforcement underneath the, engineering department. And we're gonna have our comments about that by October 30th. I also thought of some other ways we can make this system work better, and Peter, I'm glad you're here, because I'd like to hear your comments about some of these ideas as well. So I've been spending a lot of time looking at the code, the New York State Code in particular. A common principle that's stated over and over and over again, in black and white, is you should avoid legal disputes. Legal disputes are the last cause of action. It's something that should be avoided. It's like, it will say pretty clearly, this is something you should take these steps, notice, opportunity to be heard, discussion, consultation, and legal proceedings are recommended as the last thing you should ever do, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely correct.
Question, sure.
So I don't think that's the way we've been here. I mean, some people have so what I would like to do, there's three things I want to propose. The first thing is, I want to propose that we create a system whereby before any legal action occurs, the item is referred to an outside consultant. A lot of towns use these outside consultants. I had discussions with several code enforcement people from other towns over the last week. And what they do is they get an independent opinion about the interpretation of the code before it's applied to a legal case. So basically you have a check before you bring a legal action against somebody. So you can say, is this interpretation of the code correct? As in your legal opinion as an outside consultant. That's one. Peter, you look concerned.
Not concerned with the idea of getting a legal check before sending it outside. So just making face and looking at me or thinking about
Okay.
potential directions that could go.
The point is, that way you don't have a question about whether there's bias or not, because you have an independent third party who says, there's no bias here, that's the correct reading of the law. Because what the reality is, when you take something to court, people are just not armed as the way a professional code enforcement person is. So if the idea that, well, we always win in court, well, that doesn't mean a lot to me. Question is, did we exhaust all of our resources and make sure that we made sure everything, they took every step possible to avoid conflict with a citizen?
Is this on our agenda today?
It is. This is part of the complaint policy. Yes. And the second item would be, on top of this, would be to create a change in the code whereby we avoid possible complaints from citizens. Where if you look at other towns, what they do is it's stated very clearly in their town code that there's a process. The process is, number one, there has to be a written complaint before the code enforcement goes after a citizen for anything. So it's number one, written complaint. Second step,
Signed or unsigned?
As long as
Because
it doesn't have to be
I've had
named.
a problem with that in the
It's gotta be
past, I
anonymous
was told
or
that they
allowed.
don't have to be signed.
Well,
And I
I-
could never figure that out, why, if somebody's complaining, why wouldn't they sign their name?
Really?
because they're scared.
I
Well,
disagree.
that would make
I
sense
think
though,
you
cause
can.
they
Yeah.
fear of retribution,
What
so.
about the open notorious issue?
Well, here's what we get to the next point. So you have a written this is what I was advised from someone that this is how they do it in other towns. You have a written complaint. The second step would be the response. So this avoids the idea of people driving around looking at people's backyards, et cetera, et cetera. You have to have a written complaint for us to take action against somebody or dangerous exigent circumstances. One or the other. So you have a written complaint. The second thing is you send a letter saying, please respond to this written complaint. You give the person 10 days to respond. If they don't respond, you send a third letter saying, we have a written complaint, you have not responded, we're going to visit your property. So that's the way it should work. And also,
You're saying that's the only kind of code enforcement we'd be doing?
Yeah.
As in,
well, that's the way other towns do it. I can show you examples of code I found where they put that right in the code saying, and by the way, the code enforcement officials have said to me, the people I've been speaking to, is it is not the duty of the code enforcement people to be driving around looking for problems. That is absolutely frowned upon by that community of people. They say you look for dangerous circumstances, you do required inspections, and you do, like, for example, if there's mandatory fire inspections, you have to do it, or you do complaints. And we've advised the code enforcement people to focus on complaints, and they haven't done so. So I've talked about two things. I'm almost done, and I hear your opinions. The first one was we changed the code to have this process of notification and opportunity to be heard. Then the second thing is we put a check on legal actions by the code enforcement department to make sure there's no legal actions unless we have verified by an independent party that there's an accurate reading of the code. And the third thing I'd like to propose is that code enforcement has expressed to me on multiple occasions, especially regarding Dunlop, that they are busy. It is very common for towns to refer major matters like that because it is a huge undertaking, hundreds of hours, to an outside consultant. And I think in circumstances like that, we should consider, well, this is really not, this is a little bit different. Maybe I'll talk about it after. Well, that's kind of customer service. So if you have an opportunity, I think for major projects like the Dunlop project, we should consider obtaining the advice of an outside consultant to do a quick and speedy review of the project because it's in the interest of the town to get the project done. And I think for a review of the project that size is a considerable task. A lot of towns refer the matters to outside consultants or to the New York State itself for backup. It's not often done in-house because it's such a cumbersome task to do. So I put 3 things on the table. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I like that idea,
the outside consultant idea?
for that big project.
For a big project.
Some of that might be out of their scope too.
See, I don't really
Yeah,
have
You're talking about
an
big
appreciation.
time stuff, I like that idea.
I like that
For
idea
big
too.
projects like that,
Thank you, Teresa.
I don't mind the letter, the only thing is, you're gonna start getting tons of letters unsigned. I've seen this in the past, so you get a bunch of letters unsigned and it's one neighbor pissed off at another neighbor and they send a letter in. It happens all the time. And then what? And then there may be a legitimate concern there, but nobody goes investigates a legitimate concern, or it could be one neighbor getting mad at another neighbor. I don't know how you sort that out.
Well, I think if you give them the opportunity to respond, like 10 days for them to respond or come into code enforcement to explain the situation, I think what I want to avoid
What
is,
he's trying to say is, do we do we take an unsigned letter?
You
as a
have to though,
complaint,
because
Right?
you can't, you almost have to, because they're afraid that somebody will have retribution.
It goes
against
back
them.
more broadly to the notice issue, right? So, I mean, from a liability perspective, what,
That's what I was gonna ask you.
yeah, the concern becomes if the town's aware of a situation where there's a violation of code. Like, for example, a building that might be, potentially able to be occupied for commercial purpose that doesn't have adequate fire prevention systems, or something that, you know, would be really bad if something were to happen. If you were to say that we won't investigate that unless we have a complaint, or institute a process that would prevent you from doing that, and we were aware of it or should be aware of it, I mean, the likelihood is we'll be named as a defendant should a lawsuit ever be brought. So,
But that, when you talk about that sort of thing, that is something we believe we regularly look at. I mean, don't we send people out to check the
you
fire?
know, we've had times
Yeah.
that uses have changed and uses have been set up for one purpose, and then somebody started inviting the public into a property, and, you know, suddenly it was open for the world to go into, and well, it was okay for a, you know, use number one without emergency exits and
So
fire
if you
prevention.
become aware, though, somebody
Right.
has to make you aware,
Well, I
something
mean,
has
let's
to make
say,
you
for
aware.
example, hypothetically, it's, there's a sign outside the property as the code enforcement officer drives by that says, you know, come into our new business, or whatever it might be. You're driving down the road, or there's adverts in the newspaper that are brought to the attention of the code enforcement officer, or something like that. So there's circumstances where the town ends up becoming aware of a code violation situation that could present an issue.
That's pretty overt, though,
Well, I
that's
think-
something that I
This
think.
is
That
an
goes to your,
example.
that's maybe to Nate's point of, or presents a public safety
Yes.
risk as
Yes,
well.
I
I
think it
think a
falls
public
under that.
safety risk would be someone installs a pool without the proper
Fence.
Yes.
fence or height or whatever,
But if
ladder.
nobody writes a complaint, but
You can't
but
do
if
anything
code
about it.
enforcement sees that,
You
do
get
we
to
tell
this.
them not to inspect it?
They have to be able
See,
to.
I think our code enforcement guys would say, anytime there's a violation of the state code, it presents a public safety risk. So if you leave it to the discretion of, you know, either complaint or public safety risk,
Passive, yeah.
how do you,
It's well written in the code,
how do you
and
ascertain
New York
that?
state law, that they should not be hunting and seeking out complaints or
Can
violations.
you share that with us, just so we
Sure,
can see it?
I'll share both an example of a law that shows the system I talked about, and I'll try to show you the references that say that this is, the last case scenario should be action, especially legal action.
One other point, I mean, years ago, we did give the code enforcement guys sort of a set of documents to use. You can't actually bring a code enforcement, you can't bring in information, you can't file an information upstairs without having established that you gave somebody notice and opportunity and those kinds of things. So, while it's not as embedded in the code as I think you're suggesting it should be, Nate, or could be, but, I think, or they should be following a process that's similar to what you're suggesting in the ordinary course.
Well, I think what Chris often brings up a good point. He's always says, change the code.
Change the code.
But I think it's very difficult to do that comprehensively. But I think if you put in this mechanism, it would slow down actions, or maybe sometimes it's not
Well, those
appropriate.
actions, I think, I'm not gonna say they happen a lot, but they happen, we know that they happen to certain people more than others, and I think that should come to us then, first.
I
And then
think
we
this-
should say, cause a lot of times you don't hear about this stuff until after the fact, and then you start getting irate phone calls, and then you go, what the heck just happened? And maybe they're legitimate, maybe they're not, but I certainly would like to know if the public's gonna be calling me that this is an issue before, cause you can,
So do you think
Squash some
with,
of it.
you know, he's proposing like 10 days, or sending a letter out, if we would be copied to those
Yeah,
letters, at
but
least we
then
would
You know,
know.
as far as an outside consultant, that might have some merit too, but what's that gonna cost
Well, I,
like, 'cause the other thing too is we do have the ability to go to, he's not there anymore, Vijay Kumar, to get an opinion on a code.
That's the
Yeah,
state,
so- and that's
that's the
something that
state process too.
Cause I've done that a lot in the past,
And we've had Doug do that too, Doug's done that when there's a question.
But I've always questioned Doug on certain things, and I called BJ Kumar up, and I got his opinion on it, and it was different than Doug's, and when he presented to him, he had to listen to both sides, and these issues aren't black and white, there's gray area, the way they're written in the code, they're not black and white, so you've gotta get both opinions, and then somebody's gotta be the referee of this stuff.
Well, I think if we had, I think the code is very clear. We had a huge discussion 2 weeks ago maybe, partially in executive session, partially outside of, about interference with the process, and the process that was told to me by the code enforcement officer is that the only tool they have to make people comply is what? Remember what he said? Court. He said it very clearly. The only tool they have to comply is court. Well, upon reviewing the law itself, it's very clear. The tool they have to make it comply are vast, and court should be the last case scenario.
But how far do you go with somebody? Let's say you give them 10 tries? Do you
Well, I
give
think
them
if
20
we have a
tries?
process in the law that's very clearly states out that has to be a complaint, unless there's another, I'll try to, let's do this. We can't,
I'm a little leery on that one.
Well, I'm just saying,
Well, let me-
if it's in the process and you know it,
let me benchmark some,
then how long do you give somebody to either comply or not comply because it's not necessary?
well, this would be the process. Go ahead, Mike.
My biggest concern is, we see a pool getting put in, the appropriate inspection hasn't been requested, no one's complained, some little kid drowns, we knew about it. I don't know that you can just say that the only way in which you're doing code enforcement is in that manner.
I'm not saying that. I said if we knew about it, then it would be a different scenario. But what we don't want to do is use satellite imagery and Facebook postings and Twitter postings to look for people's property infringements, which is what is alleged to have happened in the past on Grand Island. So that's a different, there's a fine line. So I was trying to figure out a way to give people an opportunity to feel like they're not being.
If it's truly safety focused, I think that's probably how we need to, if we're gonna do something like what you're suggesting, I think there's gotta be an exemption for safety.
So why don't I do this? We have the draft complaint law
I
here.
mean, if it's a deck, I don't mean to,
So go ahead.
if it's a deck, there should never be that kind of an investigation, it should be a complaint or whatever, but if it's something directly safety related, then I think.
Kids are in danger. I agree.
Right.
If you're putting a pool in though, you're gonna have to get a permit to have a pool.
Well, what if they don't?
That would be the
That's-
trigger.
I
That's the
know
thing.
more than one
So it's-
potentially in the past, way back.
In the
I
ground,
don't know him today, but if I were to know him today,
in the ground or
I'd
above
let
ground.
Doug know.
Well, if someone's digging a hole, well, this is what I'm gonna do. So we have a complaint mechanism listed. Guys, I want you to get your opinions on that. It might be a bad one, might be a good one. We've worked on it.
They've received a copy of it.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it's not a bad one, it's just,
Figuring out
what's the
exactly.
right way to do it? And I think they're good suggestions, it's just if you're gonna have everybody start writing letters, you're gonna get flooded with letters. If that's the only
But we
way.
get flooded with calls now. And by the way, I should say we've
Then
never,
you gotta go investigate all the letters if that's the way you're gonna go after it.
I could say this, I've never, can Cindy tell me if I'm wrong on this one? I have never, by the way, I should say this, I never received a direct, specific complaint about a vacation home since I've been in office. Like, I've never received a call of someone saying, hey, this just happened, could you go look at, I've never received one, by the way.
For 2.5 years, I've been.
Vague ones I've
getting-
received, but I've never received a
I've been
specific
getting
one.
hammered with them for 2.5 years, so.
Let me say this, let me draft a law based on some other laws
It
I've
was
seen.
interesting how you slipped that in there.
Well, it was just relevant.
Well,
But let me give you that, draft law next.
well, how would that work if you had, a consultant? I mean, how would that
There's
work?
multiple guys who consult towns.
What do they do? I mean, how does that work? I never.
So when we have a question before we take someone to court for,
So you wouldn't go back to
It's
the
expensive to me.
permit process?
well, we don't know how
They
much
would
it is, we
start
have
at-
to look into the cost.
Wouldn't it start at the permit process?
No, before we bring a cause of action against somebody, we say, listen, this is the cause of action we wanna bring. Do you believe it's an accurate interpretation of the law?
Okay, well, see, that's good, but why can't that start at permit process so we don't have to even get there?
Because we shouldn't, because the whole purpose of code enforcement should be compliance, not punishment, and the goal should get to people to be compliant.
But if it's compliant and there's a misinterpretation of a law, that should be resolved at the time you
But
take out
Isn't
a
that why
permit.
we have
not-
an advisory board for that too, or a board for that as well?
We
I mean,
You
don't
How
have
many,
an
how many,
advisory
how
board
many
for
layers are you gonna
zoning.
lay into it?
Yeah, but
Well, I
you
just
don't
don't,
have an
but
advisory
we
board
just
for
wanna
that.
make sure before,
What board is that?
it's a traumatic experience for the state to take action against somebody on their home before, for their business. So before they do that, we should probably
And
give
that's,
them,
yeah, so if they can get an interpretation and it's set right from the beginning, you won't have any problems, everybody knows. I mean, it's not Doug's opinion, it's,
what were you gonna say about this?
That's not actually the way that it works from a legal process though, because the code enforcement officer, so in terms of interpretations that are made, let me tell you sort of how it's historically been done. The code enforcement department would probably say that 95% of what it does is very black and white. Like, you can't build this within so many feet of that, you can't do this within whatever. I mean, they're objective measures, they're not subjective stuff that's complicated at all. For the percent that is more complicated, in the past, code enforcement would have had some consultation with outside counsel before it took action, or at least should have. There certainly would be circumstances you can point to where that didn't happen. So there's been a procedure a little bit like this in the past. But the way that the legal process works with the zoning board of appeals is available as, for any type of a zoning or sort of other dimensional misapplication of the law. So if our code enforcement department makes a decision that somebody thinks is inappropriate, there's kind of an internal appellate procedure that can take place at the ZBA, and then its own appeal process that works. I'm not sure that there's a methodology under the law to have an outside entity render an opinion, have that opinion be binding to the town. You could certainly have somebody on the outside provide counsel to the code enforcement officer and make sure he knows what to do. And the town board could certainly give direction to the code enforcement officer about priorities, the things that are important to enforce and the things that really shouldn't be enforced. But as the actual decision that's made, the law contemplates that we're gonna have, either we will or the state will have, a code enforcement officer who's authorized to do certain things.
So this is the point I'm trying to get at. If we put engineering over code enforcement, I think it's good from a customer service standpoint, and also we have 2 certified engineers
Right.
that have plenty of knowledge. I'm looking for another source of knowledge that the town board doesn't have. None of us have years and decades and decades and decades of code enforcement experience to be an additional check on this process.
So just so I understand the process, as I'm still learning, the zoning board of appeals, wouldn't they be the ones that you would escalate if you have a concern
So they
related
do
like
two-
this?
They do 2 things. The ZBA can grant variances, and they can be asked to issue interpretations
Regarding the code?
regarding the code.
Okay.
Not regarding any piece of code, but regarding application of the code to sort of physical, dimensional, and other zoning type requirements. So I build something where I'm not allowed to build it, that kind of thing.
But like, let's just say a
Not
painting booth,
interpretation.
a pool, a elevator, a.
Right, so not the state building code, matters that relate to interpretation of the state building code, and the building officer's interpretation of that actually has a separate procedure through the Department of State if you disagree with it.
Okay.
So you can bring matters to the Department of State and
and then some people have run on that in the past.
right, and it has
And
happened
it's
here.
worked, I mean, it's, but
But I hate to
that's
see-
way down the road though.
I was gonna
Way
say, I
down
hate
the
to
road.
see
Usually after a court case has been
citizens
brought.
have to go to that extreme if it's unjust
Right.
and spending money on attorneys and whatnot.
Should never
There
be
should
live
be
by.
some, and
But
I
that
think
doesn't-
I like where Nate's going with this, because it's about that stopgap between that, getting them in court and having to get expensive attorneys, and actually, getting somebody in compliance without going to the court,
So-
saving us money in
So
court.
where do you
I
use
wouldn't
that?
disagree with that at all, but
Before,
you do have one other legal check that you're doing right now. You've got your town prosecutor that actually writes the informations. So when you get to the point in time that Doug turns it over and says, okay, we're gonna put this thing upstairs in court, that's when the town prosecutor gets involved and is
the
effectively.
town prosecutor generally follows the code enforcement's opinion.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
he's
when
not,
he's
he's
trying
not an
to-
expert on that code.
He's
And so that's the
been
question.
doing it for a while,
You're
but
looking,
it's.
I'm looking for another expert to give us an
Before we
opinion.
get to
Or,
court.
well, this is, we could even
I
assign,
just hate creating more levels of bureaucracy,
I
that's my
understand that,
concern.
but we have
It's-
we're ending up in court
It's-
so much
it-
that the thing is we have to find some sort of process, I think that's fair to the citizens.
it's not
So that we-
bureaucracy to stop citizens from doing anything.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a bureaucracy to prevent the state from taking action against citizens' rights.
I'd be curious to know, are we above average, or do we think we're above average in terms of the number of court cases associated with code enforcement?
I don't know if that'd be useful to look at.
Well,
It'd be nice if we could benchmark that.
I think it helps
wonder how
anyway,
you would
because
go
I
about
think-
doing that.
I think there's a clear position by our town code enforcement that's been expressed to all of us, that what? That they believe their number one tool for compliance is prosecution. They've said it to us. And if we interfere with the prosecutorial process, we're ruining their ability to enforce the code. When really, the clear intent of the law, as it's stated in the law over and over again, is compliance, not punishment.
Right.
It's compliance. So if we can figure out other ways to get people compliant and allow opportunities for people to become compliant, we should do so. Any way we can.
We need to
And-
put our
okay, let me just say one
fingers
thing.
down and do
If we
something.
kept a third-party outside independent consultant available to us for issues where we thought it was brought to our concern, or part of the complaint process is someone asked us to go to that person, we could do that and only use it for cases where the town board agrees to use them.
And it wouldn't have to
Well,
be
you
for every
also-
situation.
You also have VJ Kumar, whoever his replacement is, you can do that with.
It's
No.
free.
I mean, I called him and he's picked up the phone right away and I said, is this right? And he goes, I don't interpret it that way. And then you can go back, cause I can't go back to anybody in code enforcement. If they say this is the way it reads, I read it and I can see it, but the
Because
state
he
says,
with the state.
That's the problem, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, he
the
actually.
state says, why read it this way? So who am I to say you're right or you're right? So at least you have some ammunition to
So
go
it
in and
sound-
say, it could be this way or this way.
It sounds like you're worried about the outside consultant's part, but you're not so
I'm
concerned.
not worried about that, I just, when is it gonna be used? I mean, if it's not gonna be used right from the beginning on a problem or a project, then it's a waste, cause you're gonna end up down the road and people aren't gonna be able to resolve their issues.
But you're not so concerned about the fact that we may be able to put together a change to our code to allow for a more robust process of notice and opportunity to be heard. So let me draft that up and I'll submit it to you guys for review.
A lot of times it's the way you deliver the message to somebody too that makes them compliant or not compliant.
Absolutely.
So if it's
Absolutely.
not, if it's not delivered properly by the right people, you're gonna have a problem, and
Right.
Gotcha.
that's
So,
part
so
of the
quick
problem.
question, Peter, you might know the answer to this. Is there a way to benchmark? Are we above average? Do you know if there is any data that's out there?
I'm sure there is, but we do some training for code enforcement officials across the state. I can ask my guys to do that, just sort of fact, though. What we might do is just reach out to some comparably sized communities, right? I mean, it wouldn't be a tough thing to do and ask, you know, how many code enforcement cases do you have pending at any particular point in time?
Who's the guy with the state, do you know who he is? He's
The
not-
replacement of BJ,
I don't know
I
who he is,
forget-
I haven't called him since last year.
Yeah,
Because
it
if I
might-
hear that we're double what everybody else is, we have, it'd be nice to know just if
I'm
we're
sure it's
broken,
not
how.
double, I'm sure it's,
Well, it might be.
my guess is a slight increase.
So, what is the title of
Be helpful to know.
BJ's? So
He's
if
like
we were
the
to call-
senior code enforcement something at the Department of State, but, Doug will know the replacement guy, cause Doug calls him on a periodic basis when he has code interpretation questions.
So, I'll put together a draft law just for you to consider, and we'll look into the numbers, and then, so on the Dunlop matter, I think it's, can I make a motion to suspend the rules and talk about that for a moment?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Looking sharp, Mr. Bilka. I don't know, oh, sorry, it's my bad thing you looked through or something, you look good though. The other motion, so, I would like to seek bids for a outside consultant to do the review of that matter to get it off our plate as quickly as possible.
I'd like to just see what the price is.
Yeah.
So I'm okay for getting a bid, we just need to know what the price is, but that's actually what we're talking about.
I'll seek multiple bids.
Right,
So unless you
absolutely.
guys object.
What do we need to do?
I wanna seek multiple bids to outside consultant to review the Dunlop architecture. It's a very intensive labor piece, maybe possibly, who knows, 100 hours of work, man hours of work. Instead of doing it through overtime, I think we should do it through an outside consultant.
Is
Get it done
it
quickly.
definite that it would be overtime?
It would be, well, they said they're too busy to do it than me.
So
Yeah.
they actually said
The
it.
last time I brought it up to them, I don't know what they're gonna say the next time we talk to them, but the last time I said, they said they're so busy. So I said, okay, maybe the best way to do this is to get an outside person on it. I think Ray, you actually the one who,
Just on that
Recommended that.
project,
on that project, or other projects that are important to town on a case by case basis.
case by case.
And other towns do this. by the way. Other towns do this because these massive projects are so labor intensive that it takes a lot to do.
I actually was thinking about the fact that there might be a code enforcement officer out there who's just retired and still retains the licenses or whatever he needs, that he might wanna come to work for us on a part-time basis.
Like a surge capacity.
Yeah, on a call type
Right.
of thing.
That'd be
And
nice.
I talked to Doug
That'd
about
be
it,
a
and he
great
said, well,
idea.
I could look around, I don't know if he got any answers to that or anything like that. I got a feeling that if we hire somebody, it's gonna cost us more than it will for our guys on overtime.
That's fine, I don't care how
I
it's,
don't know.
I don't care how it's done, as long as someone is concentrating on this so we can get it done.
Mhm.
And I looked at it, I'm like, this is gonna take a lot of time to do. There's lots of changes, there's gonna be constant back and forth with the architect to get it right. So if we had someone doing that, and if it's a former code enforcement officer who knows exactly what needs to be done, I'd be open to that.
Either that, or if we can have these guys, get some of it done during the course of the day and then work some overtime on it too. Whatever's cost effective and gets it done quickly.
Well, I've already kind of mentioned the fact that they can do that, and there hasn't been much of that. So, but I'll follow up on this and
Check it
find
out.
ways to figure out, and I'll give you my recommendation next meeting. Okay?
Well, I'm gonna do the same because I'm liaison to that department,
Okay.
so I'll check to see what other kind of options we might have.
So
Do you wanna
overtime
follow-
cost, outside consultant cost. I do like the surge idea. If we had someone on, not necessarily retainer, but someone that's looking for a little bit of side work and suddenly we find this opportunity and we pull them in and I think it would improve our customer service. That sounds like a
If it
good
gets it
idea.
done, I'd be happy.
So we're gonna look into bids for consultant, we're also gonna look into what Ray is proposing with this fellow.
Sounds good to me. So, that's it. I don't have anything for the executive session, because we kind of talked about it outside of executive session, and we talked about some of those issues, so.
I got one.
Go ahead.
We had a motion on the
Session.
table. I had a motion
What's the motion?
to authorize the supervisor to seek quotes for outside consultant to review the Dunlop project and or on a case-by-case
Oh.
basis, projects that may come up possibly on per diem basis.
Okay, I think we still wanna go ahead with that, but we also want Ray to.
No reason why we
look
can't
into
look
the
for what the costs are.
Yeah, and Ray
Do
can
you
look
wanna
too.
follow through on that?
Is there a second?
Does that even take a motion or,
Well,
it seems like that could just be done, right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do
I
it.
just said you made a motion.
I'm just
so-
gonna do it. Okay, and I'll tell you what it costs next time I talk to you guys.
And Ray's gonna do it too.
Ray can do it too.
Because there's no cost for it, so I don't think there's a motion
Okay.
required.
So we probably should have a meeting too on how that reorg is gonna go.
Yeah, we'll do that before the 30th. Let's get through this, let's get through the meeting
I
on the,
just hate to create a false time urgency on that when we're dealing with the budgets here. I mean, that's gotta be number one. We're gonna have a lot of work to do on the budget, I think, so. I'm
we
just
have
a little bit
three
concerned.
workshops on that. I mean, this other item is a pretty simple vote. I mean, we can tell, it's not a big change. There's no money for the town. It's simply creating another layer of oversight
Checks and
to
balances.
make sure that we have less friction with the town and the people. That's it. I think we should do it, well, we made a motion to do it before the 30th. If
I
there's a
need to
counter
better
motion,
understand it. I just haven't had a chance to investigate with all the other stuff going on, so. And the
Any other
budget's gotta
motions for
be
this
the
meeting?
priority.
I do have one executive session item
Sure,
for
let's
you.
make a motion to move
Well,
into,
yeah.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.